We've got next up David, pronouns he, him, calling him from California. What is the basis of knowledge? Is David's question. David, you're on the Atheist Experience. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How you guys doing?
I'm doing really great, man. Never had a bad day in my life. What's going on?
Yeah, I wish I was as happy as you, and I'm a Christian. Yeah, I just wanted. I know you guys made the claim that you've not had any verifiable evidence for a God in the 20-some years that you've had this show.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Is that true?
Yep. We've yet to hear a good argument that really convinced us.
Nothing that really got to me either, but
okay, so yeah,
feel free.
The likelihood.
Yeah, well, let's hear it if you have one.
I've been listening to you guys for several years, so the likelihood of me presenting any evidence to you that's verifiable would be slim to none. So I just kind of wanted to address what you consider knowledge or what you consider as evidence.
Well, those are two different things. In terms of knowledge, that's going to be there's a whole field of philosophy about that. And I am not a philosopher. I would use the term probably colloquially to just say something that is, verifiable in your day-to-day life, something that you run off of, something that you base your view of reality around, something that you have a feedback loop where you can test it and double check it. I would separate it from belief being something that either is somewhat subjective or doesn't have a concrete thing to connect it to. Or also there could be a second definition of belief being like something that's like meaningful. Like I have a belief in human rights, but it's not like I can go with a meter and go measure human rights. You know what I mean? So like you're going to get into a big, weird, esoteric, thing about semantics and definitions. I don't know if that's super worth your time to get into. In terms of evidence, that's one I can answer. And to say, what's my evidence of anything is something that's testable, something that makes predictions, something that I can go out and look for a concrete reason to believe a proposition. Even if it's not something that I can see with my eyes or smell or hear or something like that, that's what instruments are for. And science is for testing things that don't appeal to our basic senses, because our basic senses are shown to be wrong all the time. So that's what I would go with that. As far as evidence for a God specifically, I don't know for sure what would count as evidence for that, because I, with my limited understanding of the universe, probably wouldn't be able to distinguish between a God performing miracles and super advanced alien technology or just a really good magic trick. That's the whole point. If I go watch Penn and Teller make a potato appear inside someone or whatever it is they do, I don't know how they did that. That doesn't mean that they're divine, but I have no way of measuring that. However, if God exists and is as powerful as everyone says that they are, then that creature would know exactly what it would take to convince me and to prove to me beyond a shadow of a doubt that they are real, and they choose not to. And that, to me, is a testament to either their inefficacy or their non-existence. So that's where I would come from with your question. I know it's kind of a long, rambly answer, but I wanted to make sure that I was very concise with it, because I don't want to misspeak and have you be like, oh, well, you don't know what knowledge is, therefore how can you know anything? You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. So there's really not that much that would be considered evidence then, by your definition, because it's...
Well, that's the point, is that God would know for sure. If God existed, God would know exactly what to do to convince me. I couldn't give you anything off the top of my head right now that I couldn't then also logic my own way out of and say, oh, well, he can come down and raise somebody from the dead. What if necromancy is real and it's a D&D world, or what if the person wasn't actually dead and I just made a mistake and I didn't realize there's, or what if there's some amazing alien technology that this is like a type 1 civilization that's able to animate life from nothing? What if they're like the Forerunners from Halo? You know what I mean? Like, what if there's all these other things that aren't a God that could do something that I would consider miraculous? I can't, just not account for that. But if God is real, God knows for sure what to do to convince me, and he doesn't.
And I've got a question for you, David, and feel free to, I don't want to put you on the spot. Do you have a particular God you believe in? You said you're a Christian.
Yes, I'm a Christian, yeah.
Okay.
Born again Christian.
Okay. So the standing meme on the show for me is that if, against all established knowledge of biology and medical science, my eyes, which are thoroughly knackered, were somehow healed properly, fully, that would be seen as a miraculous thing, because we don't know how that could possibly be done. Even if that happened, and even if I were to attribute it to a divine entity, how do you know it would have been your God and not Allah or Brahma or Amaterasu?
Yeah, I just accept that there's only one, so I don't say that those other gods, as they're so called, were not legitimate beings or whatever. I mean, just mortal beings or whatever. But I just consider that there's only one God. So,
that's where we go a little bit awry as well. Like, I can't even decide, even if you could prove that our God did it, like, which God is it? We don't know.
I think it was, wasn't it Bertrand Russell who said that considering the sheer amount of faiths on offer, all of which conflicting with one another, even somebody who believes in a God should expect damnation as a matter of probability. You know what I mean? So I think, you're saying, well, I just accept that there's one. How did you come to that conclusion? What evidence do you have for that? How do you know that? Like, why would you make such an assertion? Because the only thing crazier, in my opinion, than saying that I know for sure there's some magical supernatural entity outside of space and time and outside of our scientific understanding is knowing the dude's name, and I know which one it is. You know what I mean? That's a very expensive argument to make.
Yeah, well, everybody has their threshold of evidence. Obviously, lots of people have decided that they had sufficient evidence for a God, otherwise they wouldn't be Christians. Or
there's plenty of people who said they were Christians that didn't have evidence, but they would have been killed otherwise, I think.
Yeah, that's we can go back to that. But like, what's your threshold? Why do you believe the thing that you believe?
Well, my threshold was fairly simple, actually, because I accepted Christ when I was 18. So up to that point, though, I was kind of like a pothead atheist, not learned anything about God or anything, because my dad was Catholic when I was born, and so the priest told my dad that we were all bastards anyway, so because my mom was Presbyterian. But anyways, so we were raised as atheists, so I wasn't really programmed to believe anything, to be quite honest with you, and I programmed myself to be a rebel. So when I became a Christian, I didn't know anything, so I was taught monkey science and all that kind of stuff or whatever in school somewhat, and but I didn't really adopt any ideology, so I was pretty much a blank slate. So I didn't accept any of it. I didn't believe anything. So my threshold is fairly simple. It was just to really read the Bible, to hear about Jesus, and then after having read the book of John, I just accepted it as a fact.
So you had nothing on your mind. You were a blank slate, and literally the first thing that was offered to you, you accepted as truth, and you haven't changed your mind since. What would you say?
The first thing, like I said, I was raised up to 18 years old, hearing whatever they teach in school or anything like that. So I wasn't.
Forgive me when I say the first thing. I'm making a hyperbole there. It's the first thing that you intentionally sought out, and that you had this first religion on offer was Christianity, because science isn't a religion, and what they teach in schools about evolution isn't religion. This was the first religious explanation for the universe that you were legitimately interested in. And so you locked onto it. My question to you, and whether or not that's entirely accurate or a fair representation of what you're saying, notwithstanding, because I am oversimplifying what you're saying, I accept. But my point is, what would you say to someone who said the exact same thing that you just said, but replaced the word Christianity and everything with Hinduism? They were an atheist, and they were taught whatever they were taught in school. And then one day at 18 years old, they went to the Hindu temple and they learned about Hanuman, and they learned about Shiva, and they learned about Krishna, and they learned about Ganesh. And they were like, you know what? This makes sense to me. And they bought into it, and they believed it ever since. Do you think that that's a good reason to believe what they are believing?
Well, I don't know. I think Hindus claim to believe in a god, but I don't really know. I haven't studied that. So
well, I'm asking you, do you think that that would be a legitimate reason? And would it change your mind as a Christian? Be like, you know what? Maybe I should be Hindu because this guy had this experience and he believes it.
Well, no, I've studied lots of religions. I don't accept them. But no, the reason why I accepted the first one as Christian, which was probably the first one presented to me. I mean, I read about the other Greek gods and stuff probably in school and things like that, but none of that stuff seemed to appeal to me at all. So it's not anything I ever adopted.
I mean, I would say
I had a need. Let's just say I had a legitimate need, and when I had that legitimate need, that was the God that was presented to me at the time that solved that problem.
Yeah, I think you and I agree on that. And so my question to you, well, let me ask you two questions actually. First, so where did you grow up? Where in the world did these things happen to you?
I was born in the United States, in Tennessee. My dad's in the Marine Corps.
Tennessee,
moved all around.
So you're in Tennessee, a deeply religious part of a deeply religious country, the United States, and that is the religion that you were exposed to. And I know you said you studied other religions, but you had already accepted Christianity by that point. So my question to you then is, do you think if you were born and raised in Saudi Arabia, that you would have the exact same beliefs that you do today? Or do you think the predominant religion of that country would be the one that you were the most exposed to, the one that you had social and familial pressure to join, and the one that you inevitably decided was true?
Well, I have the freedom to accept any religion in the United States. If I was in Saudi Arabia, I would probably be a Muslim because I wouldn't want to die. But
as far as I know, aren't there Christians in Saudi Arabia? Am I wrong? Pick another, if I'm wrong about that, pick another predominantly Muslim country that has freedom of religion. I don't know about the geopolitics of the region at this moment. I'm not going to go check.
Afghanistan right now.
Sure.
Right, okay.
Sure. Yeah. Is it just pick another one? Yeah. Is it a country that's predominantly Muslim, but has Christianity as an option? You're like, the point that I'm making is, do you think that the surroundings that you grew up in played a major part in the religion that you inevitably chose? Or do you think that you found Christianity by chance and it just so happened to be the only correct religion?
No, I don't. I was like 8 months old when I left Tennessee, but I grew up in America. I grew up in numerous states, and I really never heard about Jesus until I was 18. So it doesn't make sense to me that you're claiming that I was subject to some influence of where I lived.
I mean, you knew the concept of Jesus, I'm sure, like, and the basics of the tenets, because it's part of our culture. I mean, you celebrate Christmas and all that kind of stuff if you were brought up Catholic. There is one thing I would like to go. I'm sorry to just slightly hijack this a little bit, but it's very interesting. Sure. You say that the evidence for your faith is predominantly the Bible. Is that correct?
Yeah,
okay.
That's true.
Now, from my perspective, and I haven't read all the Bible yet, I'm trying to get through it. That is a very deeply flawed book. There's lots of internal inconsistencies. There's lots of stuff in that does not comport with what we know of reality. And there's a lot of stuff, especially in the Old Testament, but also in the New, that's pretty morally reprehensible from a humanist perspective. So, I mean, how do you, and this is an honest question, I'm not asking you to like defend your faith or whatever, but how do you deal with those aspects of the book that you have taken this closely held belief from? Because if I read a science textbook that was 1/4 good stuff and the rest either bad or wrong or harmful, I would throw that textbook away.
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, I didn't. Like I said, I didn't accept any ideology like secular humanism, so I wasn't influenced by that. But I was a pretty good sinner, as far as sin is concerned.
Well, that wasn't really my question. You are a Christian now, and that comes from the Bible, but there's a lot of stuff in that book that is either wrong, inconsistent, or, at least in my opinion, bad. And how do you come to terms with that?
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying is things called knowledge or evidence, you're making claims about morality that you cannot really prove by science or by history or anything like that. It's just your worldview. So,
I mean, we can.
That's the problem I have with your claim.
Yeah, I have a major disagreement with that, but it's not really the point of the call. Yeah, so I would say that I would challenge that significantly. But like I think what Jamie's driving at here is that if you're deriving your faith from the Bible, why don't you practice all of it? And I know for sure you don't practice all of it because you're not currently in prison. So like, how do you derive meaning from the Bible, and where do you decide that you are going to believe this thing, but you're not going to believe that thing?
I don't understand what you're saying as far as I don't practice all of it. I mean, it's just like science. I mean, the science developed over a period of time, and certain things were accepted, and then there was new revelations. That's what the Bible is. It's accepted. Fact.
The Bible specifically says that if your child is unruly, if your son is disobedient and disrespectful to the parents, that you are to bring him before the town and say, this child is drunk and lazy and disrespectful, and then you stone him to death. Why don't you follow that part of the Bible?
Do you have any examples in the Bible of that happening?
Yeah, I can. Yeah, sure. Let me pull it up right now. I'll just Google it.
And my contention is that because of what we now know, a lot of the things that are depictions of reality in the Bible and stories that people hold to, like the creation myth, Adam and Eve, the global flood, are demonstrably like impossible. Like they do not comport with reality. And these are the foundational concepts upon which a Christian's view of reality itself is built on. And if you choose to go with the more demonstrable things that we know about in science, the fact that a global flood couldn't have happened, how do you reconcile that? Or are you a Bible literalist?
Oh, I'm definitely a literalist. Yeah,
and
I'm not a flat earther. No, I don't believe in flat Earth, but yeah, I do believe it was created in 6 days, and it's almost 6,000 years old. Yes.
I find that
so here in Deuteronomy 21 is, you were asking for an example. Deuteronomy 21:18, if a man has a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they are chastened to him, he will not hearken unto them, his father and his mother shall lay hold on him, bring him out to the elders of the city, and upon the gate of the place, and they shall say unto the elders of the city, this is our son, he is stubborn and rebellious, he will not obey our voice, he is a glutton and a drunkard, and all the men of the city shall stone him with stones that he die. So shall you put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. So that's a direct command in Deuteronomy, in the Bible, that if your son is rebellious and doesn't obey, then you should take him in front of the city and announce that he's rebellious, and then all the city shall kill him together. That's in the Bible. Do you think that should be practiced?
Well, that's not an example. Yeah, that's not an example. That is a commandment. Yeah, you got that.
Okay, then let me give you some examples of some other hideous things, like in Exodus, where we talk about slavery. Exodus gives clear definitions of slavery. It gives clear instructions on where to get slaves, how to beat slaves, how to sell slaves, how much to sell them for. It makes exception between Hebrew and non-Hebrew slaves. It says the Hebrew slaves go free after 7 years, except if they came in single and you give them a wife and they have children, then the wife and children remain slaves. And if the husband wants to stay with the slaves, then they are your slaves forever. It talks about how slaves are your property and are passed down to children. It says slaves can be taken from the heathen among you, and non-Hebrew slaves can be beaten with a rod. And as long as they don't die within 2 days of being beaten, then that's okay. It gives specific instructions in the book of Exodus on how to beat slaves. And slavery is mentioned several times. Even in the New Testament, I think it was Paul said slaves should obey their masters, especially their Christian masters, and even their cruel masters, because they'll partake of some of their reward in heaven. So there's something that does have real world examples in not only in the Bible, but in the real world as well. In America, we had slavery and we justified it with the Bible. We had the Slaves' Bible, where people cut out every single line about liberation and freedom and justice and all these things. And they kept the parts that said slaves obey your masters. And that's what was taught to the slaves here in this country. So that's something with a clear edict from the Bible, clear instructions from God. God never contradicts it. In fact, God says several times, Jesus says that slaves should obey their masters, and it has real world implications that still affect us to this day. Why don't you follow that part of the Bible?
I do follow that part of the Bible.
How many slaves do you own?
Well, I let all my slaves go. But
Are you being serious with us now, David? Come on, please.
I'm just playing with you now. But I obviously don't have any slaves, okay?
Well, let me give you this example then.
If I lived at the time of slavery, it's possible I would have been one. That's most likely because I am kind of rebellious. So
no,
yeah.
If you lived during the time of the transatlantic slave trade here in America, very unlikely you would have been a slave unless you were black, because those are the people that we had as slaves. So like rebellious didn't really matter. I don't know.
Well, those were the people that were selling slaves. I don't.
Okay, here's another example,
anyway,
David.
I wanted to address one thing that the blind Limey said.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Jamie, yeah. So he was talking about scientific evidence. I'll address your points because you always go to the incorrigible child and slavery as if that was some kind of, I got you. But I will address that. But concerning the science part of the Bible, King David had said in one of the Psalms that as far as the east is from the west, that is as far as I will remove your sins from you, when God was talking about forgiving people their sins. Because God is not an immoral thug. He's a God that will reason with you, because we all deserve to die in our sins. And the fact that God doesn't kill us proves that he's reasonable. He's a reasonable God. He does reason with us. So he gives us time. So when he said that, and in the book of Isaiah saying he called it the circle of the earth, it was talking about a circuit, which is a thing that begins at one point and ends in the exact same point in a circle, in a 360 degree. Well, but anyways, when King David said that, he was predicting the magnetic poles.
Okay, no, I cannot take you seriously, David, on that. I mean, I have other points that I'd like to bring up.
You didn't let me finish. No, he was predicting the magnetic poles, because if you go from north to south, right, you're going to eventually go north or south, and the two are going to meet, right? But if you go from east to west, you never meet east and west. You just keep going east. If you keep traveling east, you're still going east. You never meet west. And the same with going west. So that's predicting the spherical planet right there.
I mean, they knew the planet was a sphere long before Jesus was alive. But here's another thing, because I really, really cannot take that seriously, because he doesn't mention anything to do with electricity or magnets or magnetic fields or anything. You're just talking about cardinal directions on a map. But here's another thing. I'm bald, as you can see. Should I sick bears on children that make fun of me?
Sorry.
So you wanted an example from the Bible of something that I would find reprehensible, that was done by a person in the Bible, and that was beseeching God to have bears maul children. Was it 42 children to death for making fun of his being bald? So if a kid makes fun of me being bald, should I be able to sick bears on them?
Well, yes, you should.
Okay, I'm done. I cannot continue the conversation in good faith. I'm sorry.
What really sucks is I actually have been sitting here pouring through my Bible, finding other scientific inaccuracies I was going to bring up to you. We were going to talk about different parts of the Bible that don't make any sense. I was going to talk about different religions that had different opinions from you, and and different predictions of the natural world that came true that were not necessarily religious. And like, it seems like you're just not being serious, man.
Yeah. And if you are, I mean, I don't really know what to say.
And I'm not just talking about you joking about bears. I mean, all of this. It seems through all of this that you either haven't thought this out or you're deliberately avoiding thinking about it.
Yeah.
I mean, for fuck's sake, dude, Aristotle talked about atoms thousands and thousands of years before they were discovered. Just by basic logic alone, talking about dividing something until you get to something undividable, which is where the word atom comes from, atomos. Aristotle didn't believe in Jesus. Is that evidence for Zeus and Poseidon and Ares? Because we had this guy who made such a great prediction about atoms, so much that he fucking named them, as opposed to your example of, well, he said east and west, but what he really meant was magnetic poles and this other thing. And if you think about it this way, all these post hoc kind of applications trying to make something make sense. We have examples of people who actually made sense, who had totally different belief systems well before your God ever supposedly existed. So like I was, and here I was going to point out in the Bible, where it talks about pi equaling 3, not 3.14. So this is another, like, we were going to go into so much of this, and it seems like you genuinely just don't give a shit about what you're saying, as evidenced by the fact that apparently you just hung up. Yeah. So maybe try calling back when you're serious, dude. It's really, really lame to hear.
I don't know which scenario upsets me more. Either he's not being serious and he's just pulling our chain to be contradictory, and fair enough, I suppose. But if he actually believes it, that I should be able to enact violence upon children that make fun of me, and he actually believes that, like, I'm sorry he's so broken. It may sound condescending to say so, but that upsets me a little bit.
It's a sad time. It is a sad time.